A young teacher, once stripped of everything for daring to protect a student, now she steps forward again, unaware that the child she defends is the daughter of a millionaire CEO, a man who could end her career with a single nod amid swirling misunderstandings. A single sentence from him shifts everything. Some stories don't begin with love, they begin with a brave choice. Are you ready to hear it? The early September breeze slipped through the classroom window just as Solène Véran set her leather bag on the teacher's desk. Morning light filtered through the tall glass panes, dragging a pale streak across the wooden floor. It was her first day teaching at Wimberley, a tiny town west of Austin, Texas, and everything felt so new it caught in her throat. She took a deep breath. The room smelled of old wood and chalk dust, as if it still held the childhoods of hundreds of children who had once sat there. Every chair, every desk seemed to carry a whisper, a laugh, maybe even tears that had never been spoken aloud. Solène, just try not to stand out too much. People are afraid of that in small places. The voice of an old friend echoed, suddenly in her mind. But Solène had never been one to take the easy road. And not when she was a French-born girl growing up in conservative Texas. And not now, at 27, with a career already marked by the quiet scandal of being too kind. Class 3B burst in like a flock of chattering sparrows. Children's voices rustled through the room, curious eyes flicking toward the new teacher. A boy in glasses darted by, waving at a friend. A group of girls clustered in the back, giggling into their palms. But Solène noticed the far corner of the room, where a small girl sat hunched over her notebook, coloring intently. No one greeted her. No one sat near. The seat beside her remained empty. Solène walked over and crouched gently down. "Hello? I'm Miss Solène." The girl looked up. Her ash-grey eyes widened. No fear, no shyness, just a foggy distance, as though she was still somewhere far away. "My name is Kalia," came the whisper, light as wind through leaves. "That's a beautiful name," Solène smiled. "What are you drawing?" And on the page was a solar system, but not a usual one. The sun at the center was a deep indigo, and the planets shimmered in silver jade rust, full of emotion and mystery, as if belonging to a world only Kalia understood. Solène was about to say more when the bell rang. The children took their seats. She returned to the front and introduced herself, her name, where she came from, a few things she loved. Old movies, crusty bread, and the hush of the day's end. The class lit up with interest, but the air shifted when a boy named Kellen, clearly the leader of the room, raised his hand. "Miss, did you know Kalia's the weirdest kid in the class?" Laughter erupted. A girl chimed in. "She talks to shooting stars." Solène felt her throat tighten. She glanced at Kalia, still motionless, eyes lowered to her hands. No protest, not a word. The class waited, testing their new teacher. Some wore half smirks, expecting a shrug, a knowing look. Instead, Solène rose, her voice low and steady. "In this classroom," she said, pausing on each word, "different is what makes us unforgettable." Silence blanketed the room like a heavy quilt. "I'd be heartbroken if any one of you were treated that way, and I believe we are here to learn how to be human, not just how to take a test." A breeze brushed through the window. Outside, sunlight slanted across the playground, painting bright shapes across the desks. At the edge of the schoolyard, partly hidden behind an old oak tree, a man stood watching. His eyes followed Solène's every movement. Dressed in a plain grey shirt, coffee in hand, he looked on with the wariness of someone who'd just spotted something dangerous, something he couldn't look away from. Elian Rourke didn't like to interfere. But today, for the first time in months, he caught a flicker of his late wife, Renee, in that stance. In that voice defending a child the world had already labeled as strange. He left without a sound. No one saw him. Not even Solène knew that a quiet shift had begun in the gaze that had fallen on her. Back in the classroom, Kalia looked up. Her lips moved, barely, like a blade of grass stirring in the wind. "Thank you, miss." Solène turned, gave a small nod, but inside something stirred like a note struck softly on a piano. not triumph, and a promise still unspoken. The wall clock struck 10, and a quiet autumn morning became the beginning of something irreversible. The next morning, a pale layer of clouds hung over Wimberley's sky, the color of ash, like the hazy feeling still lodged in Solene's chest after the previous day. She entered classroom 3B with a coffee in hand, her heels brushing softly against the worn wooden floor. There was a strange sense of peace lingering from yesterday's lesson, as if she'd managed to nudge open a small door inside the girl named Kalia. But that peace lasted only until Solene opened her laptop in the teacher's lounge. An email sat in her inbox. No name, no subject, just a single line. Stay out of Rourke family matters if you want to keep your place here. The cursor blinked. Her chest tightened, as though someone had pulled a thin wire taut across her. Ribs, she read it again, once, twice. But nothing changed. No signature, no sender. Just the icy stillness of a threat, sharp, spare, and deliberate. Solene closed the laptop. Her hands trembled slightly. Recess. Children burst into the yard, their laughter crashing like surf against the windows. Solene stayed behind, watching from her seat as Kalia sat alone on the stone steps, drawing. She always brought her own colored pencils, not the regular kind, but a sleek, expensive watercolor set, each pencil labeled with her name. Careful, beautiful, and alone. Solene inhaled deeply, trying to push down the tightening in her throat. But then her phone buzzed. The principal had asked to see her. Principal Hill was the kind of woman who smiled more than she said anything of substance. Her office was tidy, lined with framed diplomas and awards arranged like quiet warnings behind her desk. This school ran like a machine, and any misalignment would be addressed. "I heard about yesterday," she began, pouring Solene a cup of tea. Solene nodded slightly, waiting. "It's just..." The woman exhaled. "Ms. Veran, I know you care about your students. That's admirable. But sometimes, kindness shown at the wrong moment can cause unnecessary complication." "You mean Kalia?" Solene asked, her voice steady. Principal Hill raised an eyebrow, then spoke slowly. "Her family holds a certain position in this town. I simply hope you'll be flexible. Maintain balance. Don't get too emotional. Flexible. Balance." The words dropped into Solene like stones into a deep well. She remembered a meeting from a year ago at her old school when she'd defended a student bullied for their gender identity, called out colleagues who turned away. They'd called her difficult, unprofessional, then quietly transferred her file. No farewell, just a door closed behind her. That door now swung open again in her memory. Cold. Shameful. That afternoon, the classroom felt quieter than usual. The children were journaling. Solene made slow rounds, glancing at their scribbled thoughts. At Kalia's desk, she paused. The notebook read, "If I were invisible, I would go to the sky. No one up there calls me strange." Solene bent down. "You don't have to go to the sky, Kalia. I'm here." The girl looked up, startled, but nodded barely. Late that night, Solene remained in the classroom alone. Fluorescent light fell on her open notebook, next week's lesson plan. But her mind refused to settle. The email still pulsed. In her thoughts like a smear of ink across clean paper. She opened the laptop again, intending to delete it, but her fingers paused. She took a screenshot, saved a copy in a private folder. A part of her already knew this wasn't just a warning. It was the beginning of something else. Her phone rang. "Principal Hill." "Solene, I just wanted to be sure you understood what I said this morning." Her voice was sweet, but carried something underneath, like the even tap of a knuckle on wood, soft but insistent. "You know, in towns like this, people value harmony more than they value justice." Solene didn't answer. She only heard her own breathing, quiet but growing hotter, like a small, steady flame catching in the damp forest of her heart. After the call, she stood, walked to the window. The schoolyard was empty. Dusk was falling. Only the yellow glow of the flagpole light remained. She thought of herself as a child labeled too sensitive, too strange, alone by the window, sketching planets no one else could see, and no one had stood then to say, "You're not wrong. You just need someone who sees what you carry inside." Solène closed her eyes, drew in a breath, then turned back to her desk, flipped open the lesson planner, wrote the first line for Monday's class. Theme: kindness does not come from sameness, it comes from the courage to understand what is different. She looked once more out the glass, and there, far off, it seemed a gaze was watching from within the dark. But when she looked again, there was nothing, just night wind moving through the trees at the edge of the yard. Monday morning arrived wrapped in a soft mist that curled around the school grounds, as if the air itself were murmuring secrets left unspoken. Solène came earlier than usual, carrying a large box filled with delicate paper orbs, each one crafted by hand through the night, modeled after Kalia's drawings. She said nothing to anyone, just quietly transformed a corner of the classroom, where the morning sun always slanted in through the windows, into a miniature galaxy. The whiteboard written in pink chalk, different day where every mind has room to shine. She didn't know if Kalia would speak, but if there was even the faintest chance the girl might feel safe enough to be heard, Solène would give everything to this day. The children filed into class, some whispering, some pointing, surprised by the new constellation of floating paper planets strung from the ceiling by invisible thread. Solène only smiled and guided each of them to draw or write about a world inside you. No limits, no wrong answers. Kalia entered last. She stopped in the doorway, gazing up at the drifting planets. She didn't speak, just walked slowly to her seat and opened her case of watercolor pencils. When Solène began to speak, her voice was soft, nearly a breath. Today, there's no lesson. I want to listen. Each of you carries a universe in your mind, and you all deserve the chance to tell us about it. A few students volunteered with ease. A girl described a vanilla ice cream kingdom where people floated on bubble-powered shoes. A boy revealed a secret tunnel system connecting his bedroom to the park across town. Laughter fluttered across the room, not mocking, only the pure delight of imagination. Then came Kalia's turn. Solène didn't call on her. She simply looked at the girl and gave a gentle nod, an unspoken invitation. Kalia rose. The room fell silent. She stepped forward slowly, cradling a small bundle wrapped in black fabric. Unfolding it, she revealed a handcrafted planetary model. Thin copper wires linked each orbit. The planets were shaded in soft watercolors, flawless, precise, not a single smear. This is where I live. Inside my head, Kalia began, her voice barely louder than a whisper to herself. The sun in the middle isn't the biggest, it just holds everything together. Each planet is a feeling. The red one is anger. It spins very fast. The silver one is silence. It doesn't spin at all, but everyone needs it when they're sad. She looked up then, her eyes finding Solène. You're like my mom. She used to say I was a little star. She said little stars keep the night from being lonely. A hush settled over the room, thick and still. Solène swallowed hard, the sting of tears rising in her throat. Even Kellen, the boy who had once teased her, sat wordless, watching Kalia with something like awe. Outside the window, Elian Rourke stood with one hand on the wooden frame. He'd stopped walking when he heard his daughter's voice, something he hadn't expected to hear at all. His fingers tightened around his coffee cup, the warmth seeping through his skin like a memory long denied. He hadn't thought she'd speak. He hadn't known she remembered Renee's words about little stars. His breath slowed, and in the curve of Solène's shoulders, he suddenly saw traces of the woman he had lost, the woman who would have made a world for their daughter to speak into. After Kalia returned to her seat, Solène stepped to the model. She lifted a pale lavender planet, small and solitary. "Thank you for showing us your world," she said. "Do you know, sometimes it's the smallest planet that lets the light in first." Kalia looked up at her. Then, slowly, she smiled. For the first time, it was soft as mist, but it lit the room like sunrise. The class clapped, not loud or wild, but gently, like they had witnessed something sacred they didn't yet have the words for. At the end of the day, Solène packed up the planets carefully, as though they were made of glass. She placed Kalia's model in a box of its own, labeled in careful script, Kalia's Universe. She didn't see Elian still standing outside. He hadn't left. He walked away quietly, heart unsettled. One thought circled in his mind. Over and over. That teacher doesn't just teach. She sees. Solène stood alone in the empty classroom, gazing up at the paper planets still floating overhead. And she whispered, "You don't need to be like anyone else. You only need to be yourself, and that is enough." Sunlight filtered through the oak leaves outside classroom 3B, catching the morning mist still clinging to the frosted window panes. Solène entered with a lightness she hadn't felt in months. Kalia had stood up. She'd been heard, applauded. And for the first time the other children had listened, not because they were told to, but because they wanted to understand. She set her bag down and ran her hand absently across the lid of the box, holding Kalia's planetary model. Few strands of silver paper poked through the edge, like a piece of a tiny universe trying to slip free and take flight. She rehung the small poster near the board, a simple illustration of a figure beneath a sky of stars. She had printed it her first month here, a quiet reminder to herself, under the sky everyone deserves to be seen. This morning, the image felt more beautiful than ever, but the morning didn't last. At recess, as Solène reviewed her gradebook, Principal Hill summoned her to the office. Her voice was flat, almost mechanical, like reading from a worn script. "Solène, I have no choice but to open an internal inquiry. There's been a complaint from a parent accusing you of favoritism toward Kalia Dawn." The room seemed to contract. The jasmine tea in its paper cup grew cloying and dense. "What exactly are the allegations?" Solène kept her voice low, her hand resting in her lap to hide the trembling. "Kellen's parents believe their son was excluded from class activities, that you praise Kalia disproportionately, and that your recent different day lesson it was too personalized." Principal Hill peered at her through slim-framed glasses, her voice softening. "You understand, Solène? In towns, like Wimberley, people notice everything. It all has to appear fair, even if it isn't." Solène left the office with legs like iron. In the hallway, a few teachers passed her with tight smiles. Not hostile, just the kind of smile that meant we've heard. Gossip, as always, traveled faster than apologies. Later, in the staff room, she opened her laptop and tried to focus on lesson planning. But one email subject line froze her mid-click. "Sponsorship committee update. Investor list attached." Something made her open it. The list scrolled past, small firms, local non-profits, and at the bottom, like a final punctuation, Rourke Tech. Innovations, primary sponsor. Representative Elian Rourke, CEO, her chest dipped, fingers hovering above the trackpad, unmoving. She opened a new tab, typed in his name. The first result was a profile from a financial magazine. Elian in a grey suit, standing beside a model of a smart city his company was developing. The caption below struck like a cold blade. Elian, Rourke, reinventing educational technology through a singular philosophy. Invest where control is needed. She printed it, laid the page on her desk, looked at the photo, his face calm, his gaze sharp and distant. Not the man in a quiet shirt standing outside the classroom watching his daughter. She turned to the poster on the board, the starry sky figure she had hung with such hope. Carefully, slowly, she tore it down. The paper resisted. Each rip scraped against her palm like a quiet punishment. The universe she had built, small, fragile, now felt like a tile in a grand blueprint she'd never been allowed to see. That afternoon, after the children left, Solène stayed behind. Alone. She looked up at the ceiling where the paper planets still floated. One by one, she took them down, gently, as though putting someone else's dream back where it wouldn't be hurt. A line echoed in her mind, one she had never dared speak aloud. "I believed in light." Turns out it was a floodlight straight to the face. Kalia was special, but now Solène wasn't sure if her care had been truly selfless. Yes, she had leaned in, maybe too far, but only because the child needed it, not because of anything else. And he had seen her, heard her, watched her, and said nothing. No thank you, no glance of recognition, only silence, either complicit or cold. She couldn't tell. She walked home under a sunset that fell like a heavy curtain, in her bag the printed article with Elian Rourke's face, and inside her a quiet fracture forming in the wall she had built from belief. Switching on the light in her apartment, she muttered, "Once again, belief makes a fool of me." The Friday afternoon stretched long in the fading light. Solène stood before the parent-teacher conference room, the door half closed, a gesture both welcoming and wary. On the posted schedule, his name was written clearly, Elian Rourke. 5:06 p.m., private meeting, no student present. She had never met him like this, inside a quiet room, not glimpsed through a window or from across the schoolyard. Her heart beat slow but heavy. Not fear, just the ache of not knowing what might come undone. She knocked gently. "Come in." His voice, low, tired, unreadable. Solène stepped inside. The room was small but bright. In the corner stood a pale wooden table, and on it, a family photo in a simple frame. A woman with long chestnut hair, smiling eyes, her hand resting gently on Kalia's shoulder. Kalia, younger then, cheeks rounder, eyes still wide with the world. Solène recognized her. Renee. The one who was gone. The one Kalia had spoken of with a hush in her voice, calling her the one who said I was a little star. Elian stood by the window, back turned, watching the schoolyard empty itself of children. He wore a grey shirt, hands in his pockets, posture straight but not rigid. "I know about the complaint," he said, still facing away. "I didn't file it, but I didn't stop it either. I needed to see what you would." Chalosi Solène kept her composure. "And now you want what exactly?" He turned. The light through the glass caught his face, making his eyes seem darker. But this time, for the first time, there was no judgment there. Only a quiet exhaustion he made no effort to hide. "Why did you defend her, even after you knew she was mine?" A simple question. But it held layers, confusion, caution, maybe even a flicker of something like reverence. Solène met his gaze without hesitation. "Because I was that child once, and no one stood for me." She walked to the table, gently laying her fingers on the photo frame. "I saw a girl struggling to believe she was enough, struggling to believe she wasn't broken, just because she saw the world differently." Elian said nothing. After a moment, he reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and pulled out a small handkerchief. Cream-colored, worn, embroidered, with a single R at the corner. He didn't wipe his face, there were no tears, but his hand clutched it like a memory he could still feel breathing. Renee was the only one who understood her. His voice was almost a whisper. "She was the brightest star I ever knew. And then, she was gone. No warning. No goodbye." Solène didn't interrupt. She listened, the same way she had listened to Kalia. "I don't know how to be a father. I can draft contracts, close deals, give speeches. But when my daughter stopped speaking, started drawing planets that don't exist, and her teacher called her a problem, I just signed the withdrawal papers." He let out a dry laugh, sharp and self-directed. "I thought, maybe, switching schools would fix it. A few sponsorships here and there, make things run smoothly if people owed me a favor." Solène sat across from him. Her gaze softened. "But Kalia doesn't need a smooth school. She needs someone who doesn't leave." Her words cut clean into the truth Elian hadn't dared to face. He sank into the chair, elbows on the table, head in his hands. No longer a CEO, no longer a name on the board. Just a father, bent, raw, and lost. "I don't know what to say to her." "You don't have to say much," Solène replied. "Just stay, listen. And don't let your presence be a condition for anything." She stood, ready to go. But before reaching the door, she turned back, looked at him, not with blame, but with something closer to mercy. "Trust is the only gift I have. To give Kalia, and I won't take it back." Elian nodded slowly. She didn't wait for more. She didn't need to. When the door clicked shut behind her, he remained seated. Next to him, the photo of Renee stared straight ahead, her smile still intact, as if she knew someone had finally done what she would have. The light of late Friday afternoon stretched thin across the halls of Wimberley Elementary. Solène stood in front of the parent conference room, the door left ajar, an invitation laced with warning. On the schedule, his name was written. Elian Rourke, 5 Gala p.m., private meeting, no students present. She'd never met him like this, inside, in a closed room. Not through window panes or across the schoolyard under stolen glances. Her heart beat slowly, heavily, not with fear, but with the weight of whatever might be unsealed. She knocked. "Come in." His voice, low, tired, unreadable. The room was small, bright. In one corner sat a pale wooden table, a photo frame resting atop it, a family of 3. A woman with chestnut hair, smiling eyes, her hand resting gently on Kalia's shoulder. Kalia, younger then, more fragile. Solène recognized her immediately. Renee. The one who was gone. The one Kalia had spoken of in a hush. The one who had called her a little star. Elian stood by the window, hands in his pockets, staring out at the schoolyard. He didn't turn. "I know about the complaint," he said. "I didn't file it. But I didn't stop it either. I needed to see what you'd..." Solène stayed still. And now, he turned. His eyes, darker under the filtered light, held no judgment this time, only something weary, almost regretful. "Why did you defend her? Even after you knew she was mine?" Not an accusation, a confession of confusion, of guilt, maybe admiration. Solène's answer came without pause. "Because I was her once, and no one stood for me." She walked to the table, laid her fingers gently on the frame. "I saw a child trying to believe she was enough, trying to believe she wasn't broken, just different." Elian was silent. Then slowly, he pulled a handkerchief from his pocket, cream-colored. One. A single embroidered R at the corner. He didn't wipe away tears, there were none, but he clutched the cloth like something he'd once known how to hold. Renee was the only one who understood her. His voice barely rose above. Breath. She was the brightest thing I'd ever known, and then she vanished without warning. Solène didn't speak. She listened, the way she had with Kalia. I don't know how to father a girl who doesn't speak, who draws galaxies instead of making friends. The first teacher called her difficult, so I signed the transfer papers. I thought, maybe a new school would fix it. Maybe donations would buy her a place to exist. He gave a bitter laugh. Solène met his gaze, soft but steady. Kalia doesn't need a softer landing. She needs someone who doesn't leave. The truth lodged in his chest like something heavy and long denied. He sat leaning on the table, head in his hands. Not a CEO, not a sponsor, just a man unraveling. "I don't know how to stay." "You don't need to know," she said. "Just choose to..." She stood to leave, then paused at the door. Her voice was quiet, but it carried something final. "Trust is the only thing I have to give Kalia, and I won't trade it for a spotlight." He nodded. She didn't wait for more. She didn't need to. Rain began to fall as Solène stepped out of the office, thick, deliberate drops striking the pavement like distant drums. The posters lined the hallway now. Community Fundraiser Day, We Are One Solar System. Beneath the slogan, a cheery drawing. Father, mother, child holding a planet. She hadn't been asked. She hadn't consented. That afternoon, Principal Hill summoned her again. "We've chosen you, Kalia, and Mr. Rourke as the campaign's image." Solène sat across from her, hands gripping her bag. "Why wasn't I consulted?" Hill offered a tight, practiced smile. "Things are going well, the students like you, and Kalia's opening up, and Mr. Rourke is our largest donor. It's a win for everyone." Solène felt something twist. "So I'm part of a transaction now." "Not a transaction, Solène. A symbol of unity." She stood, voice low but unwavering. "I didn't come here to be a symbol. I came to teach, to believe a child can be fully herself without being turned into a mascot." Hill said nothing, only placed an envelope on the table, bearing the school's crest. Inside, the official invitation to the fundraiser. Rain lashed the windows as Solène stepped outside. A few students watched her pass, their faces unsure. No longer admiration, only confusion. She walked slowly through the halls, past student drawings pinned to the walls. One of Kalia's, the silver planet, still hung on the honors board. But it looked more like a display now than a secret whispered to someone who'd once listened. Near the exit, Elian stood under the awning watching the rain. He saw her coming, her coat too thin, hair soaked. He almost called out, took a step forward, opened his mouth, then stopped. She walked past him without a glance, her eyes fixed forward, like someone who knew that to look back would be to unravel. And in that moment, Elian understood the depth of his mistake. Not in his silence, but in believing that presence was enough, that if he simply let her remain, she would. The rain fell harder, slashing against roof and stone. Solène entered the faculty room, opened a drawer and took out a small plastic card, her staff badge. Her face smiled faintly from the photo, hair slightly tousled. She held it like a tether, then stepped back into the rain. Hill watched. From the second-floor corridor, Elian remained under the awning. Solène crossed the courtyard to the main office, placed the badge on the front desk without a word. Her coat clung to her skin, cold, heavy. She turned and walked away, memory trailing behind her with every step. Her first day at the school, Kalia's eyes in that first class. The quiet, miracle of different day, the torn poster. Children waited in the main hallway, huddled as they waited to be picked up. No one spoke, but they watched her, wide-eyed, solemn. Older somehow than they were yesterday. She didn't look back. Only when she reached the gate, stepping through the wet grass, did she pause. Elian still stood there, across the yard. This time he called, "Solène." She turned. Her eyes wet with rain and something else. Her voice was calm, steady. "I didn't protect Kalia to be handed a spotlight." He said nothing, didn't follow, and she didn't wait. She walked away in the rain, her canvas bag sodden against her hip, hair clinging like threads of memory. On the desk inside, her ID lay in a puddle of rainwater, clear, visible. A record, an ending, a beginning not yet named. 3 days had passed since Solène walked away from Wimberley Elementary beneath a curtain of rain, and still the sky hadn't decided whether to let go or hold back. Spring rain, not a storm, but a quiet insistence, the kind that stays, like someone waiting to be forgiven. Solène had stayed inside her small rental cottage near the oak woods, silent, tucked away from everything but the wind threading through leaves and the scent of damp wood in the early morning. She hadn't opened her laptop, hadn't checked email. She'd ignored the handwritten letters some students had slipped into her mailbox outside the gate. She needed silence. And then, on Monday afternoon, precisely at the time school usually let out, the doorbell rang. No voice spoke through the intercom. But when she pulled the curtain aside, she saw him, standing under the eaves, rain soaking through his coat. In his hands, a paper envelope, creased, water-stained at the edges. Elian. She didn't open the door at once. She stood still, letting her heartbeat rise quietly, testing herself. He didn't wave, didn't ring again. Just stood there, holding the letter, eyes fixed on the door. At last, she stepped outside. No words, just the soft sound of her footsteps on the wooden threshold. Elian held the envelope out like a boy caught doing something wrong. "She wrote it for you. That night you left, Kalia skipped dinner. Then she disappeared for a while. When I found her, she'd written this." He didn't explain, didn't plead. Solène took the envelope. The paper was wrinkled from rain. The handwriting was thin, tilted, careful. "Miss Solène, if you don't come back, I won't go to school anymore. I don't need another teacher. I only need you." Her breath caught, not because of the words, but because of the way they offered themselves. No decoration, no demand, just the purest form of trust, a kind she had stopped believing existed. Elian reached into his coat pocket and drew out the same handkerchief as before, the cream-colored one, embroidered with a small R. This time he held it out. I don't have the right words, I never have. He paused, eyes steady. But I know how to stay. The rain kept falling, gentler now but deeper. She still didn't speak, only held the letter more tightly in her hand. I've been in a lot of places, she said finally, voice quiet. Places where I had to prove I deserved to stay. Had to do it all right. Do more. Please everyone. She turned to him. This is the first time in my life I haven't had to prove anything. The silence that followed wasn't sharp. It was soft. A space that didn't ask for more than presence. And then a voice, small and certain, rose behind him. Miss Solène. It was Kalia. She had stepped out from behind her father, wrapped in a purple raincoat dotted with stars. In her hand she held a small paper planet, the silver one she had once named Silence. Please don't leave my solar system, she said. It's out of orbit without you. Solène laughed, freely for the first time in days. She stepped down from the porch, knelt until she was eye level with the girl, and held out her hand for the planet. Thank you, she whispered, for keeping the universe together. While I was gone, Kalia didn't answer. She just stepped forward and wrapped her arms tightly around Solène, holding on like she might disappear again if she let go. Solène held her back, steady, warm, unshaken. Elian stepped back, letting space open around them. But in his eyes, for the first time, there was a kind of light that didn't require sunshine to be seen. When Solène finally looked up, the rain had stopped. She turned to Elian and gave a small nod, not agreement, not forgiveness, but something more elemental, an open door that not through word, through staying. A year later, spring returned to Wimberley with light sunlight, an open sky and the scent of freshly cut grass carried on the breeze. The little elementary school was now dressed in bright flags and ribbons, its hallways lined with photo frames, capturing moments from the year, from different day to the book fair, from class gatherings to spontaneous hugs on the schoolyard. And in the center, prominently displayed, was the photo of the floating solar system model, still lovingly preserved, still alive in memory. The 5th grade graduation ceremony took place outside, beneath the old oak tree. Rows of chairs stretched across the lawn, and children in miniature graduation robes ran and laughed with shining faces. Kalia, her hair longer now, her face open, her eyes no longer hiding, took the stage with her class's small choir group. In the front row, Solène sat beside Elian. Her hand rested naturally in his, not as a gesture but simply as a truth that had settled between them. She wore a pale blue dress and a white cardigan, the sunlight threading through the trees, casting a soft glow across her brown hair. Elian adjusted his collar, face composed but eyes warm as he watched his daughter step to the center, microphone in hand. The opening notes played, a choral version of Somewhere Only We Know. Kalia sang the first line. Her voice wasn't loud, wasn't strong, but it was real, like the voice of someone who had once walked through the rain and still chose to sing, even with a soaked heart. In the third row, a younger girl, one of Solène's current students, thin and often alone, sat with her head bowed as if trying to disappear into the crowd. Kalia saw her. During the chorus, she stepped out of the line, descended the steps, and gently took the girl's hand. Led her up, stood her beside her, no one said a word. The piano continued. Kalia handed her the microphone. Then they sang together. The final line, two soft voices joined as one. And I'm not alone anymore. Applause rose like waves, not frantic, but full and deep. No one hid their tears. No one needed to. Solène squeezed Elian's hand. He turned to her, voice barely a whisper, meant for no one else. Thank you for teaching me that even a broken heart can begin again. She didn't answer. She only rested her head gently against his shoulder, eyes on the stage, where one child had sung for all the others who once believed they had no voice. After the ceremony, Families gathered for photos. The late afternoon light fell across the field of flags, painting soft shadows on Solène and Eliane's faces as they stood on either side of Kalia, who held the silver planet model in her hands, like a symbol. The school photographer lifted his camera and called softly. 1, 2, 3, click, a moment captured, not perfect, but whole. They weren't a textbook family. There was no shared blood, no neat label, only choice, the choice to stay, to believe, to love. And in that frame, sunlight streamed through the school, doorway like a final punctuation mark, a quiet gleam at the end of the sentence, as if to say, sometimes an ending doesn't need to be loud. It only needs someone still there, stepping into the light with you.